Hi guys, this is Joel Kennedy with Kennedy Violins. So today's video, I'm just going to really quickly show you how tight to make your bow and just explain a few things and some of the dangers that can happen from you not paying attention to how tight your bow is. Okay, so how tight should your bow be? Well, some of it is due to personal preference, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But for safety's sake, here is the general parameter, right? So every time you put your bow away, you want to loosen the bow, right? So generally your hair might look like this, hair, bow, right? So every time you put your bow away, when you're done practicing, you definitely want to turn that screw counterclockwise to loosen it and make sure the hair is touching the wood of the bow, right? Because if you don't, it could warp your bow, it could pull out the wedges at the end, your bow might break by itself when it's in the case. A lot of bad things will happen. So you want to make sure you loosen that bow every time. Okay, so when you tighten it, how tight do you want to make it? Okay, again, you're going to turn that screw clockwise, right? And that's going to increase the gap between the hair and the bow. How much of a gap should you have? Well, most people would say if you're looking at the middle, in the middle of the bow, you want a pinky, like basically be able to put your pinky in there. I have big fat pinkies, so it might be a little bit less than my pinky. But for a lot of people, it's going to be basically a pinky height. That's pretty safe, okay? Now, one thing I want to let you guys know, and some people don't know this, if let's say your bow is tightened, it's pretty maximum, right? This is a little bit more than a pinky. You're in the danger zone, but even if it's not quite that tight, you can still run into a lot of problems. So let's say you go from a really humid environment to a really dry environment or vice versa. But usually it's when you go from a humid environment to a really dry environment. So let's say you're walking outside, you're going to rehearsal or whatever, it's humid, it's raining, snowing, whatever it is. You go indoor, it's cold, the air conditioner's on, and the air conditioner's on all the time. The air is really dry. So you start rehearsal and you get your bow and you go, oh, I got the perfect, it looks great, no problem. But then an hour into rehearsal, all of a sudden, pop, your bow breaks in half. What? How did it do that by itself? What happens is that if it's really dry, sometimes that wood will contract or the hair will contract. And what happens is that gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until snap. And usually it'll snap at the tip, because that's the weak point on any bow, is this little part right here, right where the tip is. So if you're in a long rehearsal, and especially if it's in dry conditions or just any kind of extreme kind of condition, regardless, just check your bow. Halfway through the rehearsal, 45 minutes, an hour in, whatever, check that gap and make sure it's not too big. I've sat in professional orchestras before when players got $5,000, $10,000 bows. They're not checking your bow, and all of a sudden snap, and they look down, oh, my baby's gone, And once you break a bow, they're never really the same, even if they're repaired. So you got to be careful of that, especially if you like your bow. So let's talk about a couple other aspects of how tight to make your bow. So as a general rule, the tighter your bow is, has some benefits, right? But sometimes the looser your bow is, has some benefits as well. So some of the benefits to having your bow hair tighter would be it's easier to play fortes a lot of the time. Right? You could play really loud and your hair won't contact the bow, so that enables you to play a little bit louder. It can also be really good for spiccato. As a general rule, the tighter your bow is, the more it wants to bounce, right? Because the rubber band is tighter, so it's going to be bouncier. It's going to be more rubber bandish, right? So those are the two advantages that can result: louder sound, and a bow that wants to bounce more. Okay, so what's the negatives? Well, what's the positives of having a looser bow? Let's put it that way. Some of the positive of having a loose bow is, well, your bow will want to bounce less. Well, why would you want that? Well, what if you don't want your bow to bounce? What if you're playing a really, right? So let's say you're playing something really quiet and it's, melodic. Well, if your bow is over tightened, it's going to want to bounce. Right? I mean, I'm exaggerating, but your bow might want to bounce at the frog. So, sometimes when you pull your bow and it gets that little wobble in there, having a less tight bow will make it easier for you to control your bow so it doesn't bounce when you don't want it to. Now, one of the other advantages to having a looser bow, again, is going to be having your bow not bounce when you want it to, or to bounce when you do want it to. So it can be a little bit easier. So having your bow tighter is good for it's good for sautille strokes, and having a looser bow is not as good for sautille strokes. But what if you're doing a brush stroke? Sometimes with a heavy brush stroke, you don't want your bow as tight because it makes it a little bit harder to control those heavy brush strokes. So that's why I said in the beginning of the video, how tight your bow is due to personal preference. So you have to find the tightness that is your personal preference, and also how tight you make your bow may be for the kind of piece or kind of exercise that you're currently working on that might make it a little bit less challenging for you to sound the way that you want to. Okay, but the number one thing is safety, right? We don't want our bow over tightening because pretty much all bad things happen if your bow is over tightened. So hope this short video helped, and don't forget to subscribe and like the video. And yeah, if you guys have any questions or comments, put them in the video or put them in the links below. And I hope you guys have a great time practicing. See you later.